So moving on to the next question, from the jobs that you've taken on and the different positions you've been in, what did they teach you about what you're looking for in a job and what suits you and your ambitions, your goals? And could we go with Aaron first again?
So in the different jobs that I've had, it, it, there's a there's a separation of whether or not it's the industry you're interested in, or the job function you're interested in, or the people that you see on a day-to-day basis. I think when you're younger, you're more enamored by the industry, second by the function, and then last by the people. I think as you get more and more experience, that actually flips. You're very much interested in the people that are around you, because that's who you're with on just multiples in hours in a day. The function, irrespective of the different industries that you might play in, ends up being really, really important as well. And you find the application, surprisingly, in industries you've never thought of. And so the blend of kind of understanding an industry and the intersection of finance has brought me into numerous industries that I'd never thought I'd be interested in. I personally don't have a huge interest, for example, in the health sector, but by virtue of the people that I was really interested in working with and the problem I was trying to solve, which really piqued my interest, I found myself in working in an innovative financing project while I was a management consultant within McKinsey, and eventually supporting the UN system and launching a platform that I eventually ran as its CEO for about 5 years, delivering advanced health products in sub-Saharan Africa and other parts of the emerging markets. And so these just realizing what pushes you to be a success might be a little bit different than what you wake up to. Obviously, they're sexy industries. You want to jump out of the gate and enter into investment banking or management consulting, and you think that's exactly what you want. Don't get me wrong, those are wonderful training grounds for the future. I still apply my McKinsey toolkit to almost everything that I do. But I think what's driven me to be a success is the people around me, my mentors. One of my mentors while I was at Northwestern, Professor Tim Conley, that I ended up being his research assistant in econometrics, that analytical rigor that he pushed me to actually served me well for many, many years afterwards. And then that actually led me to be interested in the subsector of the functional roles of being analytical and problem solving. And then the industries just kind of followed third, which is very different than when I started looking.
Fascinating. And that's it's a very concise taxonomy. Yeah, industry, function, and people. Very nice. Phil, could you go next?
Yeah, I concur with what Aaron said. I think that's the lens in which it starts to evolve. I think people matter the most. For me at this moment, I think when I look back to when I graduated. I think I didn't know what I wanted to do. I maybe many like you were just kind of applying to different jobs. To Aaron's point, a lot of fertile ground for good training could kind of be a part of a bigger organization, learn something. And so I remember applying to everything: consulting, investment management, research, this sales and trading job. And I was trying to do an inventory of just like what appealed to me at the time. So I'll be frank. I read the reason why I picked sales and trading was really I was part of this investment club at Northwestern, the Nugget at the time, and that's what got me interested. And one of my friends asked me to a meeting my freshman year, and he and I were really good friends actually. I'm from the Chicagoland area, and so he and I were really good friends. And I remember we were collecting baseball cards and things like that, and he was like, "Stocks are like baseball cards. There's a story to them." And so that was like the foray into it. And then we did it all 4 years. We were, on executive committee, like, just things that got you involved. I would attribute to Northwestern. And then I read this book called Liar's Poker by Michael Lewis. And it was actually a book to say, don't go into sales and trading, but it made me want to go into sales and trading. And it, ultimately I had offers in all these different things, but I didn't know what to do, but I think that story really got me going in terms of the fast pace of it. It was definitely one where you're problem solving every day in a way, whether it's interpersonally or in the markets or something new every day. And I really like that. And I think that drove me. So it was trying to make an inventory of the things that I liked, I thrived in, and I was okay with. That may not be, how you thrive, but you should make that inventory. It's like, what's that environment? What's that, who are the people that you work with? Like, you may not know because you haven't worked, so you got to kind of foray into it, and it may not be that might not be where you end up. And, I think I encourage that exploration. I think I encourage having that network that you're talking to kind of educate yourself on things. But for me, it was and it wasn't like what I expected, but there's a lot of adrenaline in it. It was fast. I loved the people I worked with. Every person I met, they're there for a reason. So even today, as I think about every person I meet, they're there for a reason. What is that, like, one thing that they're really good at, and how do I self-assess? And if I can work on that, somehow I become a better person or a better worker at something, right? Or I'm learning on working on something. So even to this day, whether it's looking up at mentors, or getting reverse mentoring from younger people like yourselves, I'm always thinking, what's that one thing or two things that person's really good at that I can be working on? And I think that served me well in terms of just navigating my career.
Thank you. And finally, Tia.
Yeah. For me, I mean, I knew that I wanted to do something somewhat analytical, just given, the major that I was in. And so I started looking at roles in finance. And I think for me, I was really focused on what kind of role would give me the most opportunities and optionality going forward. And so I felt like from everything I had heard from people who had done investment banking before me, I had heard that, it's a great, whether or not it ends up being a great career fit long term, it's a great stepping stone to do other things. It opens a lot of doors on buy side roles and private equity or hedge funds, et cetera. So that's kind of why I decided to go into investment banking. And then when I got there, like, I found that there were aspects that were analytical and were interesting, but it was a little bit more kind of around transactions, and less so kind of having a long-term view on companies. So then that kind of prompted me, after I was at JP Morgan for a couple of years, to look for something on the buy side and more of an investing role. And I felt like that was a good fit for me. But for me, really, just the first job out of undergrad was really just around, what's something that's gonna open doors for me and put me on a good path in terms of having, a lot of different options down the road.
Right. And so with this last question, we also seem to have spoken a lot about the people we encounter at these jobs and how they drive us forward. So the next question would be, is there any networking advice that you could offer to the students here today, especially specific to your industry, and tips that you have found helpful and that have taken things forward for you? And once again, we could start with Aaron.
Sure. So I would bifurcate the kind of the path of thinking about your next career into two different ways. On one end, by all means, definitely take advantage of kind of the formal programs that Northwestern offers and through its career services, and getting in front of just different organizations that are coming in. I will tell you, after having gone through a number of interviewing rounds while at Northwestern, but also as an alumni thinking about students to hire, there is a machine that is kind of the recruiting, interviewing, and then eventually extending an offer process that you just want to get into that cycle. It serves you well to do that. That's on kind of when you've decided where you want to go. Now, when you're still trying to think about what the next step is, just being open to talk to every single individual that might be interested in this industries or sectors or functions that you're thinking about, and leverage the people that know you the most, the professors. The professors are respected in their industry, and asking them to kind of help you think about what might be a next step for you. The professor that served as a research assistant, his wife was actually an investment banker, and he was the one that was pushing her to interview me as a mock interview for the next step. So talking to your professors and thinking about what the next step might be, that's a great, easy hurdle for you to overcome, because they already know you and love you supposedly. So leverage that as much as possible, as to open doors. And I think you'll be surprised. A lot of them see themselves in you and want to be helpful. So take advantage of it.
Thank you. And yeah, those two different contexts would require different approaches, and that makes a lot of sense. Phil, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I would just say kind of what I mentioned before, like the organizations that are on campus that may be focused on some of those industries. There are, I think, a handful on Northwestern, and I definitely have alumni here at Goldman who have been part of that, and those are like the first pools in which we look at, to be honest. So I think being a part of those groups on campus, you are instantly linked to alumni who have gone to different firms, have had different experiences, and to kind of Aaron's point, like everyone is seemingly open to helping the next generation out. I lead the Northwestern recruiting here for sales and trading, and we have grown our population here of Northwestern alumni exponentially, and it's all kind of, we're looking out for each other, right? So when we have an internship here, I would describe it a little bit like Hunger Games a little bit. It's a little rigorous, and so the Northwestern alumni, we swarm, we train, we make sure that they do well, because other schools are trying to get their kids jobs, etc. And I think it's our competitive advantage to kind of re-articulate different profiles out there and make sure that they get jobs here. And so Northwestern, the community is your biggest capital. I think it's like the biggest thing that you can have, and for the most part, I hope everyone that you've reached out to has helped you. So just even before this, there was someone who has a super day tomorrow at Goldman, and he reached out, LinkedIn me, and we just did a quick training session. So I think that even this program, this Waldron program, I didn't know about this program until I was speaking with the likes of Becky and others. I think just knowing about it, it's just I think people want to help. I think people want to get more purple in the door, and so I think that there's a willingness to do that. But we want to see you actively trying to network, actively finding those networks and being targeted about it. Do your homework, be prepared, when you do get that chance.
Can I ask a follow-up question, Sid? And that's, we've had some of our our employer partners, I'm Karen with Chicago Field Studies, but who have said the networking is gotten too much. And so students feel the pressure to network with 10 people at Goldman or 10 people at Golub or at Chase. And so, or like more is better. Can you address that? Because we've had employers say to stop the quantity of networking within the same organization. would love your perspectives, anyone on that.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one and then also just throw my perspective on this topic. I mean, it's an interesting question on networking because when I graduated in 2004, it was a really good job market. So there were a lot of companies hiring with established recruiting programs. So it didn't require a lot of networking. And quite frankly, I didn't really have a network back then. So I think it would have been really challenging. I think right now it's obviously a harder job market than it was when I graduated. So I actually think this topic of networking is really important. I think probably the most relevant experience or the most relatable experience I can think of is when I graduated from business school. I went to Harvard Business School. I graduated in 2010, and a lot of the recruiting took place and for internships were in 2008 and for full-time jobs 2009. So that was a really tough job market. And there weren't a lot of there was much less kind of established recruiting at that time. And so I had to rely on networking quite a bit. And I did go back to the Northwestern alumni database and reached out cold emailed people that went to Northwestern and then went to Harvard Business School as well. So I did a lot of that, kind of reaching out to contacts and new people at firms that I was interested in based on LinkedIn. And so I did a lot of that heavy lifting. And honestly, that was what was required to get a job back then. And so I think it's really important. And I think to that point, because a lot of times when you're sending kind of cold emails, which likely will be probably a bigger part of networking, at the undergrad level where you don't have a large network at that point. I don't know. I personally, I think a lot of times people are busy and they don't do it on purpose, but they might see an email from a Northwestern alum and not respond. And again, not intentional, but sometimes that just happens. And so to me, I don't think there's downside to reaching out to more than one person in an organization if you're not having luck reaching people. I think if you are having luck like reaching somebody, then I don't know that you need to reach out to a second or third person within the organization. That may be viewed as a little bit too much. But yeah, if you don't succeed with the first person you reach out to and there's another contact at Northwestern that's at the firm you're interested in, I don't think it hurts to reach out. But I do think it is really important. And I think kind of going through the experience I did when I graduated from business school and really relying on network search as part of my job search strategy. I think now I'm like much more, I feel like every time somebody reaches out to me, I really try to pay it forward and try to have those conversations, try to help people out where I can. And then over time, you help somebody, maybe they can help you with something. So I think that's kind of how networking grows and builds. And I do think over the span of a career, it's incredibly important. So, yeah, I think it's important. And that's kind of how I've approached it in my own career.
Thank you for that follow-up, Karen. Very, very helpful question. Phil, Aaron, do you guys have any thoughts on that? As Tia also mentioned, an interesting point is that timing matters a lot, right? I mean, if your job market is great, maybe you don't have to do it at all. But what is your assessment of the time that we are in currently right now, post-pandemic or whatever? And yeah, how much of a requirement do you feel networking is at this given point?
It really depends on the institution, to be honest with you. I will say when I left Northwestern and joined Merrill Lynch, the networking was pretty much non-existent. It was part of the regular cycle. But I think that the task of networking is one irrespective of what you do right after leaving or to leave Northwestern, but it's something you're going to end up doing for the rest of your life. And I constantly am talking to folks in different institutions and alumni, fellow alumni and other organizations. So I think it's okay to reach out. And Tia is absolutely correct that I get bombarded with a number of students all the time with an interest in buyout private equity. And I try to respond to as many as possible. And sometimes I'm just a little bit busy at that time. So if they reach out to some other individual in my organization, by all means, go for it. And at times I will not be available. At times I will be available. And so I think, Karen, I would just say, you probably just had somebody that was just in a bad moment and just wanted to kind of push back to someone, but that's okay. And if an alumni within an organization is pushing back, saying they don't want to interact with the student, that tells you something about that institution more than anything else.
Yeah, I would add, I would concur with all of that. I think, yeah, folks are busy along the way. I think the main one thing I would say is if you do make a big breakthrough, right? Like if you do speak to someone, treat that as kind of your capital out there, right? So you want to take care with that. That's what I'm trying to say. It's like if you do get that chance, please be prepared, right? You're taking that person's time, and it is busy, right? And so if you're able to make that impact, make that connection, I do think what happens here is it keeps on spreading, right, in a good way, right? So someone else will be like, oh, did you meet this person? You should talk to them. And then suddenly it grows. So kind of what Tia was mentioning, like and I think like the way we think about it here, and the way if I ever get someone a job here, we're working together. I always say the same thing that Tia says: pay it forward. Like that's the only way it grows. Like if it stops with you after you've been helped, that kind of stinks, right? Like everyone should feel the onus to kind of actively try to help in the same way that they were helped. And I think that that's kind of what is beautiful about the Northwestern culture, I think. And I think that is what good networking is. So, it does take some shots. I think there will be, quote unquote failure or maybe no responses, feeling ghosted, et cetera. But, I think doing it properly and reading the room goes a long way because, in my world, it's a small world as well. Like we have probably like, 20-25 Northwestern folks that are in global markets here. And so we all talk. We have a big chain actually. So if you hit it up several times, but do it poorly, everyone will know. So that's why I say take care, make sure you're doing well, and you'll know if you're doing well because they'll pass you on to someone else to talk to.
Can I just underscore Phil's point about like do your homework? Yeah, there have been times, people come like, oh, tell me what Goldman Sachs is, tell me what Merrill Lynch is, tell me what McKinsey is. I think those things you can do enough Googling to get and come with a little bit more substantive oversight. I think the ones that, even though as busy we are, those that have done their homework, done a little bit more with regards to whether, which groups someone is in, what they've actually done in the past, you elicit far more of openness and willingness to do the next step, which is connect you with someone with an actual opening that can be an offer. So Phil is spot on around do your homework.
Right. And just a reminder, if anyone in the audience has questions, again, feel free to put those in the chat. We haven't gotten too many yet, so we can just continue with the plan that we had beforehand. So next question, what are some trends that you see in your profession, whether related to the pandemic or not? And whoever wants to take it first.
All right, I'm happy to go. So trends that we're seeing. So I'm at Golub Capital. We are a private credit firm, so that means we invest in debt of private equity deals. And again, I focus on the technology sector. In terms of trends that we're seeing, so I would say that just in terms of financial trends, I guess, obviously the pandemic was a tough time. It was unpredictable. A lot of people were concerned about liquidity, and making sure they had enough cash to run operations. And so that was like a very unpredictable time. And then coming out of the pandemic, like in the year to 2 years that followed, it was actually very much a reversal, very, very significant growth for technology companies. Just like in my market, like the terms were very aggressive and people were very there was a lot of deal activity and all of that. So it was kind of a good time to in the private credit business. And then in the last year to year and a half, I would say we've seen a slowdown where M&A volume's lower, deal activity is slower, and there's been kind of a reversal of kind of terms that you're seeing in the market. So that kind of has been going on, for some time, but we're beginning to see that unwind a bit, and we're beginning to see deal flow come back. We're beginning to see terms become, more company favorable again. So it's interesting, the shift that we're seeing. And I think that might translate a little bit into the hiring market as well. I mean, I think like in the last year, it's probably been a tougher market just for people, people graduating from undergrad and finding jobs in finance. It does feel like that's beginning to unwind a little bit. There seems to be a little bit more optimism. So yeah, so it's been interesting. We've seen it swing kind of really in both directions. But I would say it's probably trending, more favorable of late.
I'll add in. So Trident is a small business focused buyout private equity fund. So we are investing sub 20 million in EBITDA in consumer industrials and healthcare. And I could say it's in moments like this, in terms of uncertainty, dislocations, that you find a lot of opportunity. So we've seen a record number of potential acquisitions and targets, largely because the marketplace has been a bit uncertain with regards to whether or not there's value out there. And the type of businesses we're typically focusing on are kind of value oriented, that don't need a lot of leverage. And as a result, they end up kind of weathering the storm a little bit, as long as you have a thesis around, some underlying subsector of an industry, irrespective of kind of COVID trends that happened, or some industry trend that happened in the past couple of years that would make you kind of wary. And I'll give you a random example. One of the things post-COVID everybody was wondering about was the housing market across the nation. We actually ended up buying an interior door manufacturer in the Southeast in Alabama, largely because we make a bet in housing. Exponentially, and so from my perspective, it actually helped us to have all of this uncertainty in the marketplace. And many a smarter investor than I have often coined the phrase: it's in moments of uncertainty or struggle or conflict that a lot of opportunities end up surfacing. And so in the private equity landscape where we play, there's actually way too many deals for us to prosecute. So I guess following the theme of like, do your homework, there are niches in areas that are going to be growing that you would be surprised, and you probably won't find out until you actually dig in and realize, wait a second, these are growth areas. They're and it's in markets like these, especially in the areas we play in. I actually think 2022 and 23 are going to be one of the most outperforming vintage years. And if you learn anything about private equity, price and vintage are the two biggest predictors of success. When there's market dislocation and people are pulling back their money, you're going to get things for a good price. And so we're buying things kind of at unprecedented low levels. And because of our thesis, the vintage that I think we're going to be getting in these market cycles are going to be outperforming. So knock on wood, I hope so.
Knock on wood indeed. Awesome.
I'm just going to add one quick thing. Is just more just in my world, I think, and probably in other spaces, obviously technology is advancing out there. I think it if used for good and efficiencies and whatnot, it makes sense. But it, our businesses that I think we're talking about are still people businesses. So, with COVID, it obviously became a gating issue on some of the press the flesh type of business, type of seeing one face to face. Obviously, we're doing more Zooms and other ways in which we can use technology to connect. But it's still, I think the way I think about it is everything, whether it's business, relationships, or other things. If there are two people, everything happens at the speed of trust. And so trust is built, trust is earned, and I think that that's how things are closed and completed. And so, COVID was tough on that. We've had, several other hangovers from that, and or waves and trends within the macro world, whether it's been conflict, whether it's been geopolitical tensions, or even things internally within the stateside fiscal stimuluses and things from COVID that are starting to wear off, stimulus checks, et cetera, that are affecting overall economic conditions and/or the job environment, I guess. So all that being said, technology is coming, AI, all those things are all in the pipelines, I think, and obviously in the headlines. And so, if used with the proper, I think, directionality or potentially, arguably moral compass to it, I think, that there's good to be had, there's good returns to be had, there's good results to be had. But I think that that's something that continues to evolve and get increasingly layered into the businesses that we're doing, but it's still a people business at the end. So I would still emphasize that.
Thanks a lot. So one last question before we wrap up with Sophia. If we could keep this one a little shorter because we head back to the main Zoom after that. So what advice would you give yourself when you were younger, in the position of the audience here today, and whoever wants to take it first?
I said my advice earlier in terms of follow the good people around you. Don't worry so much about the industries. I followed kind of brand name institutions. I got lucky with finding good people along the way. I think my life would have been a lot easier. And don't get me wrong, it's been a wonderful experience with spending time at Goldman, McKinsey, the UN, and now Trident. It's been an interesting but very fulfilling. I think I probably would have fast-tracked following a couple of individuals that were willing to invest in me. And so find those people that are willing to invest in you and spend time with them, and you'll be surprised. They'll take you to good places.
I would say the same thing. Just stay connected to good people. Like, surround yourself. I'm sure everyone has hopefully lifelong friends that they're creating at Northwestern. I still do, and it's crazy to think that known them for several a decade or so more, and it becomes one where you think fondly of that time. I would also say this, like, you're there at a premier institution. You have incredible educators. Like, yes, while you're focusing on your major and the things that are interesting, you will seek jobs. People are looking for smart people, but take those amazing classes. Like, took Russian literature at the end of my senior year, and it just was it was awesome. Like, I'm still able to intelligently talk about some of those things because of those classes, and I just would say, don't waste that either, right? Like, if you have space in your curriculum to kind of add in incredible something, maybe that's off the wall or that's just interesting to you, you have incredible educators, and it'll be something you talk about way past your graduation date.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I'd also say like don't worry about or try not to fall into herd mentality when it comes to recruiting. I think it's really easy to do when you see, different friends and peers kind of going through certain recruiting tracks, but try to stay true to what you're interested in and you're this is just the start of your career. I'm sure there's many decisions and decision points ahead of you and different ways you can kind of take your career in the future. So I try not to stress about it too much and just follow what you're passionate about individually.
Great advice. So I think we're ready to now pass it over to Sophia, and we'll wrap up our Zoom here.
Yep. Thanks, Siddharth. And thank you all for joining us today. I want to invite you to join us in thanking our wonderful alumni panelists for speaking with us today and sharing such amazing insights. I feel like I definitely learned a lot. I think it was really great to hear from all of you because I know I, as a student, I'm always thinking about all the various clubs and programs and opportunities that I'm fortunate enough to be a part of here at Northwestern. And I think of it as like a sort of investment of like time and energy. And I think all of us students are wondering like how these investments will pay off in the future. I think it's great to see examples of how our investments will come to fruition for these successful alumni. And I just want to say thank you again on behalf of all the students here. We'll now be heading back into the main Zoom room where the program planners have some more final closing remarks before we finish off the session.